I just want to start this off by just reminding you guys that these cars are becoming extinct. And a lot of times people don't think about the fact, from the car's perspective, that they will be gone sooner than later if we all are selfish and drive them because we want to drive them, not when it's best for the car for me to drive it. So, with that being said, I'm going to talk to you guys about winter driving and the snow. And a lot of you guys don't think that I know what it's like to drive in the snow. Look, my wife's Canadian. I know all about snow. Okay, I've driven a lot of snow time, and you really haven't driven the snow until you've driven in the mountains in the snow. Then you really know snow driving. If you're driving flatland, it's totally different. But yeah, when you're in the mountains and your car keeps sliding and sliding and sliding and sliding and sliding because there is you're on a hill. I mean, you can imagine the mountains. It's much worse, and that's more of my snow driving. For many years I was not doing it as much now. I was a doubled up black diamond skier, so I would always go up to the snow in my Volkswagen. In the early days, when I didn't really care about the car because there was millions of them everywhere, and you could get parts and just tear up, rob a fender off of something else, and it was like there were so many of them all over the place. It wasn't even funny. But so So a lot of us think that, it's the car's invincible. It'll keep going and going and going, and that they'll just be here. But honestly, if you're just abusing the cars by driving them in bad weather, they're not going to be here. They won't. Just to keep that in mind just a second. So winter driving. It's funny, if you get behind a salt truck or you're on a freshly salted road, it's almost like, if I'm driving in my regular car, I'm kind of cringing every time those salt rocks hit my fenders. And, on an old car like this, it's just really doing damage to it. But, so what I'm going to say is, look, you guys know in the winter, you guys that drive in the winter, you guys know the days that you're not going to do damage to your car. There's days, when the snow is falling, or maybe it's snow and rain, and it's hitting the glass, and you can't see out your windows. What are you doing driving your VW Bug? Well, I like driving it in that weather. It's like, dude, drive a car that you can see out the freaking windows. Have one that has an air conditioning unit you can turn on and defrost all the windows in a few seconds and be able to see. Why drive your VW with the risk that you can't see out the glass, on those days when it's bad like that? There's days when you can drive your VW in the winter. I know when they are. You know when they are. The plows have already come. The salt's already been on the roads. It's all dried out again. It's not snowing. Looks clear that day. You can drive the Bug. That's a good time to drive it. That's good for the car. Think about it from the car's perspective, not from your perspective. Have respect for the car. That's what I'm talking about in these videos about driving as a daily driver. It's not about you. It's about the car. Okay? It's about the next gen. If we are the ones that are so selfish that we want to drive it as a daily driver every day and not have another car, that, you're disrespecting the next generation. It's like the guy who's the hunter. He says, fuck it. I'm going to go out and shoot me a rhinoceros. Like, I don't give a shit. They're out there. I'm going to kill them. It's crazy. What are you thinking? I just want you to think about that for a second. You're killing rhinoceroses. Really is what you're doing by driving it every day when you could drive something else. I mean, it's like, yeah, but I like to drive my car in the snow. It's like, but your car doesn't like it. It's not liking it because it's getting rusty. It's not liking it because, you know, it's the slide outs are happening. It's not liking it because there's days when there's snow on the ice and you can't see it and you hit the brakes or you slow down and you just keep sliding. You know those days, and you could have saved the car, but you chose to drive it that day. You could drive your old clunker Toyota, and with the rust holes in it and everything, drive that sucker during those days, but you chose to drive the VW. So what I'm trying to say is start looking at things from, and you do whatever you want to do, okay? But honestly, I'm trying to get you to face what you're really doing is you're actually shooting the rhinoceros. All right? So, but there's days when you can drive your car, and I'm going to talk to you again. If you are one of those guys that just no matter what, I'm going to drive my car in the winter, okay? There's things that you need to do every summer, and I'm going to talk about those things real quick. So when the rust occurs, it occurs when typically after it's above freezing. So usually when it's freezing cold, the rust is not able to really start doing its thing. So a lot of people want to rinse their cars off when it's like minus, or below freezing. I usually think in Canadian or in Celsius. So when it's like -1 or -5 or something like that, Celsius, or 32 degrees, or below, it's not usually, the rust isn't usually doing the damage. It's when the temperature gets above freezing is when you really need to do your rinsing of your car. So when it reaches above freezing, get out there and hose out your fenders, hose everything underneath, try and clean all the salt off. And, that's really the best time to do it and get everything cleaned off. But in the summer, what you really want to do is get the whole car up in the air. They have these straws that you can put on the end of a spray can. And it has like a all direction spray on the straw, and you can shove it up in your heater channels and you can spray. They have the rust converter in spray cans. You can actually spray inside the heater channels. You can stuff it in different places. You can take that little straw, and it's called a 360 spray nozzle. You can look it up on Google. You'll find one. And you can spray all over, and spray that stuff all over wherever there's any red, and keep that stuff maintained, and put a little bit of paint on there. Either brush some oil-based paint on over that, let it dry, and brush some oil paste. And basically what you're trying to do is prevent the salt from penetrating through the fenders and doing the damage. That's what you need. It's not because the rust reformer or rust converter by itself will stop the rust, but and it will actually protect the area of the rust. Like if you're using this one here. Well, I can't seem to find my rust converter, but I think you guys can get the idea. It has a finish in it, and the finish is not very thick. So if it's on like your inner fenders and stuff like that, it's gonna wear off quickly. So if you put a coat of, like, say, oil-based paint over that, even if you use a brush underneath the car and brush it over the fenders and stuff like that, then what you're doing is you're creating a thickness there so that when the salt hits it, it will hold that from, it'll keep it from getting, penetrating through that as easily. So that's a good idea to have it on there. But you guys just remember, look, these cars are they're not making them anymore. They're not a dime a dozen. I mean, they were in the 90s. When I was in the 80s and early 90s, I was driving one of these things. They were all over the place. Now you don't see them. You don't see. You go on the road, you might see one, here and there, but they were everywhere. It was about every, in the 80s, it was probably about every third car was a VW. And nowadays, it's like they're extinct. They're the rhinoceros. You're shooting it. It's up to you. If you want to shoot the rhinoceros, I mean, nobody can stop you. That's the thing, I mean, even the hunters that go out and kill prey that are extinct. I'm not saying it's not okay to hunt. I mean, I'm totally up for hunting, but when you're hunting prey that is extinct, that's a problem. I got a problem with that. I think a lot of people do. But that's basically what you're doing with the old bugs if you're driving it every day. I mean, there's times when you can drive it and be, and have a calculated risk, and there's times when the risk is much higher. And I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. I mean, you could still get in an accident in the car. I mean, it still can happen. It could, and it could be, bad for you and bad for the car. But it's, if you have a lower risk, if you're doing it at times when, for instance, in the snow, there's times when you can see better out the windows. I know that doesn't, you guys simply don't drive snow. That's like, what? But if you drive snow, you know what I'm talking about. If you drive snow in a regular car, not a Volkswagen, I flip on the AC, put on the defrost, and I can see out all the glass. And the VW, old one like this, no. You're going to be wiping the windows the whole time. And then you have to stop and wipe. And then what happens when you stop and wipe? Is somebody else paying attention? Probably not. They could rear end you. You could be at a light trying to wipe and see when you can't see, and all that stuff, and you're opening your door for risk. So it's just like that's all I'm trying to explain is, look, be smart, do it. I'm not saying don't drive it. I'm not saying that at all. There's times in the winter, there's times in the dead of winter when it's perfectly okay to drive your bug. And you know when those days are. And you know what I'm talking about. The roads are dry. There's snow all over the place, but the roads are dry. There's, because the plows have come and the cars have driven over it. Maybe there's a few puddles here and there. It might not be a bad day to drive it. That's a day you enjoy your car. And it's a lot more enjoyable to drive one of these in that weather. And to drive one of these things in the actual heavy winter, it's not very fun. I drove one in these when they were, when they were a dime a dozen and there was all over the place. I drove one of these things up in the mountains all the time. And yeah, it wasn't that fun to drive in the winter. I mean, it wasn't, because you couldn't see out of the glass, because of the defrost reasons, not because, of anything else. Not just because it's a flat windshield. That is an issue as well. But they weren't really that fun to drive in the winter. When I can drive something that I'm totally comfortable in and it has heat, decent heat. I mean, the heat wasn't bad on these, but my newer car, you turn the heater on in a couple minutes, it's warm. And it clears all the glass out really quickly. It's just a totally different game. Maybe you never had a newer car. Maybe you should go try one and see what I'm talking about. So anyway, I'll talk to you on the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.